We are glad to have you tonight, and thanks for joining in. My name is Ray Ranker. I use he, him pronouns. I'm the Lutheran chaplain at the University of Maryland, and tonight we're going to kick off a multi-week series called Getting to Know Your Neighbor's Faith. And tonight we're lucky to have Nisa Mohammed with us. Before I turn it over to her, I just want to give you a little background here. We had the opportunity to be a part of an Interfaith Chaplains program for 2 years, led by some amazing women, and it brought together chaplains from many different faiths and representing, I'd say, 12 or so schools. And we had a chance to share stories and to also plan interfaith programming, especially for our campuses. And well, once the coronavirus kind of altered all of our schedules, we thought, well, this could be a neat opportunity to get together across the Zoom platform and to give especially students and others a chance to get an introduction to some of the different faiths and obviously get to know your neighbor's faith. So we'll have you muted throughout. We want to protect against Zoom bombing and all of those good things. But you will have a chance to record your questions. I'm going to share the link here in just a second. Or actually, Katie, could you just go ahead and share that with all? At any point, you can even just pull that up now. If you any point you have a question, you want to write it down, type it in, hit enter. We'll collect those. It's a chance to enter them anonymously. We'll collect those, and there will be a question and answer time at the end. So please feel free to put in your questions there. Also, we're recording this. We'll share the link for the video, and please share it. We want to make sure that it's accessible to all who couldn't join us. And then we'll encourage you to come back next week. We'll have an introduction to Judaism next week, taught by Rabbi Nancy Kramer. So we hope you will join in and share with other folks. So with that, I want to introduce Nisa Mohammed. She is the Assistant Dean for Religious Life at Howard University in Washington, D.C., also known as the Mecca, right? Is that right, Nisa?
Exactly, yes.
So she's responsible for the religious programming that serves the various needs of the campus. She advocates for the religious needs of a diverse student population. She also teaches non-academic personal enrichment classes on the Islamic tradition and works closely as part of the staff in the Office of the Dean of the Chapel. And that office's guiding principles are faith, service, and justice. So we're really, really perfect to have you here leading us in this sharing about Islam. Her other responsibilities include the Muslim worship and devotion services, counseling and advising students, faculty, and staff, and responding to the myriad of questions and challenges from race to religion to relationships. Yeah, we all got those, right? Questions. So Ms. Mohammed is the advisor to the Chess Club. I especially enjoyed that piece. And also Juvenile Justice Advocates and the Muslim Student Association. She worked closely with young Muslims to help them strengthen and affirm their faith in the midst of challenging circumstances. So Nisa Mohammed, I'll turn it over to you. Thanks for being here and kicking off the series.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm really so excited to be here. And let me tell you a little bit about myself. But first, just to echo what Ray said about the thing that the event it was amazing. We met so many wonderful chaplains from all across the country. So I'm just so glad to have met him. And University of Maryland is really blessed to have him because he's kind of funny and he just did some really wonderful things, during our time together. So, and thank you so much for having me. And I'm glad that this is a wonderful opportunity. I may copy this idea and take it to Howard because it really is a great opportunity for, students, faculty, staff, whoever to meet and learn more about different faiths. So as you said, I'm Nisa Mohammed. I use the pronouns she and her, and we're going to talk a little bit about Islam. But before we do that, let me hear where you're from. Can you put in the chat where you're from? I'm a native Washingtonian, which is a very rare thing. Most people move from other places and come to DC. I happen to have just been born in DC, Georgetown University Hospital, born and bred. So I am a native Washingtonian. Let me hear where you're from. Well, let me read where you're from. I can't hear you, but put in the chat where you're from. Let's see the breadth and width of this audience. somebody just outside of Philadelphia, grad student from Chicago. My husband is from Chicago and he adores that city. I mean, he loves Chicago so much. And this is one way that I know he really loves me because he left Chicago. He left Chicago and moved to DC, but he loves Chicago. And someone from New York, Norizaki. Okay. Grad student living in College Park. Okay. Well, welcome. I see we're from all over the place. So I'm going to share my screen right now. And we're going to talk about Islam. So, Ramadan Mubarak. Does anybody know why I'm starting out with Ramadan Mubarak? Anybody raise their hand? Who knows what Ramadan Mubarak is? Okay, and Ramadan Mubarak, this is the 9th month on the lunar calendar that the Muslims use, and it is the holy month of Ramadan, where Muslims fast from sunup to sundown. Ramadan started last Friday, so this is a very special time for Muslims, but it's a special month, but it's also kind of like, how do we do Ramadan now? Because usually during Ramadan, it's very festive. We go to the masjid for what's called an iftar to break our fast. It's a very communal, social experience, but now with social distancing, you know, how are people experiencing Ramadan? So I'll talk a little bit more about Ramadan as we go through the presentation, but Ramadan Mubarak, that means have a blessed Ramadan. So I'm going to give you a little introduction about what is Islam. We're going to talk about what the Muslims believe. What do Muslims do? And I'm going to try to end with some facts and fiction. So what you may want to do is write down some of the questions, write some of the myths that you think about Islam or some things that you may have heard about Islam. And you want to know, is that really true? You know, I've heard this about Muslims, is that false or fiction? So we're going to kind of end with that. So introduction, beliefs, what do Muslims do, and some misconceptions. So for Muslims, they believe, well, this thing is going faster than I wanted it to. For Muslims, we believe that our purpose in life, which is what the Quran tells us, is that I have not created the jinn and mankind except to worship me. Muslims believe our whole purpose in life is to worship God. Now, you may think, well, you know, are you all in the masjid all day long? You know, what are you all doing? But no, worshiping God is manifested in a variety of different ways. It's in the way that we carry ourselves, it's in our character, it's in our behavior, it's in the way we treat the earth, it's in the way we treat animals, it's in the way we treat each other. Everything that we do, that we try to do with excellence, is a manifestation of our worship of God. All of that is about our purpose of life, and all of that is about worshiping God. And you'll see numbers after different things, and that just means the Holy Quran, the first number is the chapter or surah, the next number is the ayah or verse. So this verse is in the 51st chapter, the 56th verse. Okay. So what is Islam? So Muslims believe in a monotheistic faith. They believe in one God, and the deity that they worship is known as Allah. That is his proper name. That is the God that we worship. And the holy book that the Muslims use is called the Quran. So there'll be a test later. No, I'm kidding. So Muslims are monotheistic. They believe in Allah, and their holy book is called the Quran. So what is the basis of Islam? Just what are these Muslims all about? So the basis of Islam is that we believe that the Quran is a holy book that was divinely revealed to Prophet Muhammad more than 1400 years ago, and that the Quran is the actual words of God. That God revealed the Quran through the angel Jibril. In fact, the holy month of Ramadan, that's why Ramadan is so special to Muslims, because this is the month that the Quran was revealed in. And so the holy book of the Quran was revealed through the angel Jibril to Prophet Muhammad. And the exact Quran that Prophet Muhammad had, and the Quran originally was recited. It was not a written book. It was recited. It was put onto paper later on, but it was originally recited. And so the exact same recitation that Prophet Muhammad did, peace be upon him, over 1400 years ago, Muslims today recite those same words today. That recitation has been maintained over 1400 years in its exact pristine format that same kind of recitation. So the Quran is really the basis of Muslim life, what we know, what we understand. And then the next source of understanding is what is called the Sunnah, the prophetic traditions of Prophet Muhammad, his sayings, his actions, his approval. All of what we know about him is what Muslims follow. So in terms of, for example, how Muslims pray, how do we know how to pray? Now, the Quran tells us to pray. The Quran tells us about praying throughout the day, but we know how to pray in the exact same way because we follow the way that Prophet Muhammad prayed. The way that he prayed, because the Quran says to follow him, he's divinely guided. And so the Muslims around the world pray in the exact same way that Prophet Muhammad prayed. That's how we call the Sunnah, his prophetic traditions. That's what we follow. We follow him, for as an example, we pray in the exact same way that he did. So who is a Muslim? So in this picture, you'll see these are a crowd of students from Howard University. They're right downstairs in front of my office after a Muslim Student Association meeting. So who can be a Muslim? Who is a Muslim? So a Muslim is anyone who submits to God, and really anyone can be a Muslim. It's not like, well, I'm this, I can't be a Muslim. I'm that, I can't be a Muslim. Anyone can be a Muslim. I'm a convert to Islam. I was originally Christian. I grew up in the Christian church, and I converted to Islam after college. So anyone, if I can be a Muslim, really anyone can be a Muslim. And common greetings that Muslims give are Assalamu alaikum, which means peace be unto you. And the return greeting is wa alaikum salam, unto you be peace. And so in some cities where they have large amounts of Muslims, people just exchange these greetings and they're not even Muslims. So in Philadelphia, for example, there are large numbers of Muslims in Philadelphia. Some said they're right outside of Philly. So if you know Philly, if you've been to Philly, there are large numbers of Muslims in Philadelphia. It's really a Muslim city. And people are so familiar with these terms that people say this. You could say Assalamu alaikum to really anybody in the streets of Philadelphia, and they will return the greetings, and they may not even be Muslim because there are just so many Muslims, and that city has just become so accustomed to being around Muslims, and they're very familiar with Islam and Muslims in the city of Philadelphia. So what do Muslims believe? So here's what Muslims believe. Number one, Muslims believe in Allah. They believe in one God who is very loving and very merciful. And the Quran teaches it, and the surah says, say He, Allah is one. Allah is the one and only, Allah the eternal, absolute. He begets not, nor is he begotten, and there is none like him. This is in the Quran, 112th surah, 1st through 4th verse. And this is very significant because it lets us know that there's only one God for us, and there's none like him. And no matter how we try to imagine how loving and merciful he may be, he's even more than that, because we really can't even fathom just all of what Allah is to us and all of what Allah is to the world. He's just that magnificent and merciful. Next is the angels. The angels, they do not disobey Allah's commands, and they do as they are told to do. So these are two examples of angels. I mentioned angel Jibril, which in Christianity would be called Gabriel, and another angel, Michael. In Christianity, he's called Michael. And as I mentioned earlier, that the Quran was revealed, the Holy Quran was revealed through the angel Jibril to Prophet Muhammad. And whenever Prophet Muhammad got his revelations of the Quran, which took place over a 23-year period, they generally came through the angel Jibril. Next is the prophets. So Muslims believe that the prophets are chosen by Allah to be his messengers. Adam, Abraham, Moses, Jesus, etc. And Muhammad is the last prophet. So people may think, well, Muslims don't agree or think about Christianity or understand Christianity, but that's not true. Muslims believe in the prophets that are in the Bible. And as I said, these names right here, Adam, Abraham, Moses, Jesus, etc. Muslims believe in these prophets of God as well. And that takes us to the revelations. Muslims believe that the word of God has been revealed not only to Prophet Muhammad, but the word of God was revealed also to prophets and messengers that came before him. Ibrahim, which is the Muslim name for Abraham, he brought the scriptures. Musa, which is the Arabic name for Moses, brought the Torah. Dawood, which is the Arabic name for David, brought the Psalms. Isa, which is the Arabic name for Jesus, brought the gospel. And Prophet Muhammad was the one who brought us the Quran. Muslims also believe in the hereafter, life after death, meaning that we are accountable for our good deeds versus our bad deeds. There's going to be a day of judgment and our scales will be weighed. And we pray that our good deeds outweigh our bad deeds, so that our scale is heavy on the good deed side. That's what we want. We want our scales to be heavy on the good deeds side. And so Muslims also believe in what's called predestination, meaning that certain aspects of one's life are predestined, that this is what you were made to do, this is what you were born to do, this is what you were going to do. But there's also freedom of choice that exists also, that Muslims believe that, well, I can't change my destiny. Oh, we can change our destiny. We have freedom of choice to make a great deal of amount of the decisions in our life and to really make our life exactly what we want it to be. That's what the Muslims believe. So next is the 5 pillars of Islam. Some of you may have heard of these 5 pillars of Islam. And these 5 pillars of Islam are devotional acts of worship. The first is the Shahada, and it is the declaration of faith. And it's what someone says when they become a Muslim. For example, me, when I converted from Christianity to Islam, I took what's called my Shahada, the declaration of faith. I'm going to tell you kind of a very funny story. When I first started at Howard University, I was interning there as the Muslim chaplain while I was a student at Hartford Seminary. So a student came into my office and said, I have this burning question. I'm just so confused. I don't know what's going on. I've been a Muslim for over a year. I converted from Catholicism. And I was reading in this book about something called a Shahada. What is that? So now a Shahada is fundamental to Islam. It is like the first step. So I'm wondering, am I being punked? Is there some cameras around here? Is this student sent to me to trick me or something? I'm thinking what is going on here? I did not know about a Shahada. So I started talking more and more and more, and I found out that he really didn't know. And that is because a lot of times when young people convert, they convert in isolation, meaning they're not around another group of Muslims. They're not connected to a masjid. They just hear something about Islam. They hear it in the music. They hear it wherever. And they say, you know what? I'm going to be a Muslim. And he said, I've been praying 5 times a day. I fasted during Ramadan. Nobody told me anything about a Shahada. What is that? And so I explained it to him what it was and how we're going to do it. I said, I'm going to, give you your Shahada now. And so he was like, okay, great. But does anybody have to know that I didn't have a Shahada before? Does that mean I was a fake Muslim before? Were my prayers accepted by God? What am I going to do? I mean, it was stressful for him. It was even more stressful for me. It was one of the first students I encountered. So the Shahada is fundamental. It is the declaration of faith for Muslims. And for this student, he just kind of thought, well, have I been a fake Muslim all this time because I didn't take a Shahada? So no. We believe in a very merciful and loving God who is very understanding, that you are young, you didn't know, there was no malintent. We're about to give you a Shahada right now so we can get rid of all that confusion. So that's what I did. So the next thing is the Salah. Muslims pray 5 times a day. And it is a devotional act of worship. And what it does is, the beauty of praying 5 times a day is that it helps your life not to be a run-on sentence. You know how a comma gives you a pause in a sentence? You're trying to get a better understanding of something. And so when you're writing, you put a comma in a sentence to kind of give a pause. And so the daily prayers give a Muslim pause in their life. So whatever is going on in your life, it could be hectic, it could be joy, it could be whatever. We take a pause and we thank God for getting us to this point in our day. We thank God for the many blessings. We thank God, thank God for making me Muslim. So we take a pause 5 times a day. The first prayer is in the morning, that is Fajr, right before dawn. The next prayer is Zuhr, which is not at the midday, it's in the midday, but not when the sun is straight up, a little bit after that. Then there's the afternoon prayer called Asr. And then there's the evening prayer, which is called Maghrib. And then there's the night prayer, which is called Isha, which is right when, those are all the 5 prayers. Next is Zakah, it's charity. And Muslims are taught to be very giving and helping to the needy and the poor. Next is the Sawm, it's fasting. Some Muslims fast on Mondays and Thursdays. That's what Prophet Muhammad did. He fasted on these days. And for Muslim, fasting means no food, drink, or relations with your spouse from sunup to sundown. That's what the fast is. So, especially now during the month of Ramadan. So now the fasting hours in this area are about 15, 16 hours Muslims are fasting. But in Greenland, because I generally try to look and see how long people are fasting around the world, in Greenland, they're fasting 20 hours because the sun, right, I know you're checking here, the sun just does not go down. And so when there is significant sunlight like that, like sometimes in Alaska, the sun never goes down. What they do is people there, the Muslims there fast the same amount of time as they fast in Saudi Arabia, so that they know we can start now and we can end now, as opposed to this fast is going to go on forever because this sun is never going down. So that's how they know. But fasting times vary all around the world. And I think it's in like maybe like New Zealand, where it has like the shortest fasting time of like maybe 11 hours. So the last pillar of Islam, the last devotional act, if you can afford it, is Hajj, to make a pilgrimage to the holy city Mecca. And the holy city Mecca is where Prophet Muhammad received revelation and where Islam began. And so that's also where the Kaaba is. And the Kaaba is a building that was built, Muslims believe was built by Prophet Muhammad and his son. So Hajj is very special. So that these are the 5 pillars of Islam, the devotional acts of worship. So let me talk a little bit more about the Shahada. When a person is given the Shahada, they recite, La ilaha illallah, Muhammad Rasulullah. There is no deity worthy of worship except Allah, and Muhammad is his final messenger of Allah. And when one really truly believes in this and they recite it, they become a Muslim. The Shahada is the declaration of faith, and it is so significant to being Muslim. It is like just so very, very significant to being Muslim. So when this student said, I never heard of a Shahada, I just read something about it in a book, I was really skeptical. But you never know. So the Shahada is the declaration of faith. Next is the Salah. And Muslims pray, as I said, 5 times a day. And this is a prayer that encompasses the mind, body, and spirit. It is an all-encompassing experience. But before we pray, Muslims have to be clean and pure. So there's some ritual worship actions that take place before a Muslim prays. And that is called wudu or ablution. So wudu is basically you go in the bathroom and you're washing your face and hands and you're wiping over your head and your feet to make sure that you're approaching the prayer, you're approaching your experience with God in a very clean and pure state. And also, as I said, the Salah refreshes your day. So you could be having a really bad day and then you go make Salah, you say, okay, I'm ready to go at it again. I have been rejuvenated, I have been refreshed, I made a connection with God. Okay, I'm ready to fight this battle again. Where's my supervisor? Or where's this test? Or whatever it is. Or it could just be joy. I'm just so thankful. I've just had an amazing day. Let's keep it going. Let's keep this joy going. I'm really having, the joy of my life. So Salah refreshes a person's day. So zakat, I mentioned that earlier, is charity that is given to the needy and the poor. And it also purifies wealth. Well, how does giving your money away purify your wealth? And what it does is it means that you're using your wealth for something that's good and kind and needy and welcome. You're purifying your wealth. And generally, zakat is about 2.5% of one's accumulated annual wealth. These numbers are not set in stone. People give more. Some people give less. It depends on what your ability is to give. Some people give their time. Some people may be very poor and they don't have any money to give, but they can volunteer their time. Because a lot of what happens, a lot of times students who really don't have money, but they want to be able to give. And so they give up their time, their energy, their efforts, their wisdom. So zakat is not just money, it's predominantly money, but we want people to know how to give of themselves as well. Give of your time, your energy, and your talents. Ramadan, I mentioned Ramadan. So it's a month of fasting. Muslims now are fasting from sun up to sundown. And Muslims pray a lot more during Ramadan because they want to get closer. That you want to use this month to get closer to Allah. And Ramadan also builds your willpower, because if you can fast from sun up to sundown, when you can go against the natural urges for drink and water, which is a very natural urge, you cannot deny the thirst, you cannot deny hunger. But if you're able to control that, then there's some other things in your life you thought you couldn't control that you can control as well. And so fasting helps to build a person's willpower. It also helps Muslims feel compassion for people who are in need. There are people that are hungry all around the world. And when you have hunger pains because you're fasting, it makes you pause and think, what could I have done, or what can I do? Because I know there are people who feel this hunger pain even when it's not Ramadan. And so it helps you to feel some compassion for people who feel hungry down the street from where you live, in the next dorm, in your next town, around the world, whatever. And so that's what the fasting does. It helps us to build compassion. It also strengthens community bonding, because Ramadan is generally a very festive, exciting time. In the evening, people go to iftars at the masjid, where they lay out feasts of food. You see people that you know, people that you don't know, and you have a really good time bonding. But it's very different this year. I remember, my husband and I was like, okay, it's Ramadan, I'm not cooking. We're going somewhere every night. I mean, because especially in the DC area, there is an iftar at a mosque somewhere every night of Ramadan. And there are very special iftars. There's an iftar on Capitol Hill. The embassies give iftars. Muslim organizations give iftars, as in addition to the regular iftars that are done at the masjid. So it's just a wealth of feasting and a wealth of community bonding, because you get to meet so many different people. Not this year. And so what people are doing this year to try to keep that bonding going, a lot of things are taking place online. A lot of things are taking place virtually. People are having virtual iftars online, and some masjids are having drive up and go, because there are blessings in feeding the hungry and the poor. And so some masjids are having a scheduled time. You can come by the masjid, don't even get out your car, just roll down your window, pick up the food and go. And I went to a masjid this past Saturday, a masjid near me, and that's how it was. Everybody, they had on their masks and gloves. They had the food all packaged, and the police were there also. They're like, you may think you're going to get out of your car and hang out. Oh, no, 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 no. You will not be doing that. And we have the Montgomery County Police here to make sure. People drove up, got their food, did not get out of their car, stayed in the line, and drove right on off. And so Muslims are being very creative in terms of how they are experiencing Ramadan, because it's social distancing. It's a very different time. It is a very, very, very different time. And everyone wants to be safe, and everyone wants to keep other people safe as well. Ramadan. So Hajj. So once in a person's lifetime, if they are able to, Muslims travel to perform Hajj. And Hajj commemorates the trials of Prophet Ibrahim and his family, especially his wife Hagar, and she and her child Ismail. So as you see, this black building, that statue is the Kaaba, and all of those little white dots are people. And so when you go to Hajj, you make what's called tawaf, meaning you walk circles around the building, the Kaaba. And to experience what Hajar did when she was running in her time alone after she left Ibrahim's house. And so it commemorates those trials. And 3 to 4 million people perform Hajj annually. And what is so unique about this coronavirus and social distancing, if you look at, you can see live pictures of the Kaaba all the time, because it's always like that, millions of people. It's empty, which is just mind-blowing to see the Kaaba and you don't see gugabs of people around it. It's just the world of coronavirus. COVID-19 has just taken over, and it's just taken over the whole world. It's really, 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 really amazing. So that's Hajj. Okay, let's talk a little bit about some misconceptions about Islam. So people have heard about Islam. What is this about Islam? And some of the misconceptions deal with Islam and culture, Muslims and Arabs, and the status of women. So that's what we're going to talk about, some of these misconceptions. So Islam is represented in a variety of different cultures, from Atlanta to Africa to Afghanistan. Multiple cultures, same beliefs. So say, for example, food. Food is a great way to experience culture. So what you may eat at an iftar in Atlanta, totally different from what you may eat at an iftar in Africa and an iftar in Afghanistan. At an iftar in Atlanta, you may get fried chicken, you may get macaroni and cheese, you may get some string beans, you may get some peach cobbler, you may get something like that. At iftar in Africa, the food is going to be very different. Afghanistan, very different. But there are multiple cultures, same beliefs. Multiple cultures, same beliefs. Now, Muslims and Arabs, there are nearly 2 billion Muslims all around the world, and the largest population of Muslims are in Indonesia, India, and China. Arabs are only about 15 to 20% of Muslims, but if you look in the media would have you believe that nearly all the Muslims are Arab. That is not true. 90 to 95% of Arabs are Muslims, but Arabs make up a very small percentage of who Muslims are. This is a picture of Dian Palangi. She's a famous Indonesian designer. So if you're in Indonesia or you're into modest wear, modest attire, Dian Palangi is a very famous designer. Her designs have been on New York Fashion Week, London Fashion Week, Paris Fashion Week. She's a very famous designer. The status of women. So now this is really a big thing. A lot of times people think that Muslim women are oppressed, and Muslim women are, and the Quran is used to oppress women. And during the Afghanistan war, the US military was very surprised when they went to liberate the people of Afghanistan. They thought that the women of Afghanistan would throw off their burqas, throw off the hijabs, and just be so happy to receive the Americans who had so-called come to liberate them. They were shocked when the women were like, no, we want our burqas. We want to dress like this. We dress like this by choice. You don't understand Islam, and you don't understand our faith, which is why you think that women are oppressed. So women received many rights 1,400 years ago with the advent of Islam. Prior to Islam coming to Mecca in that time, a lot of people buried their girl babies alive. People wanted boys, like in China, where they have the one child rule, and people really want boys. And a lot of societies like that. People want boys. And so if people had girls, they would bury the girl babies alive. And so one of the first things that was prohibited when Islam came is you can no longer bury your girls alive. That is just horrible. That kind of infanticide is just, no, you can't do that. And so women received the right to vote in Islam long time ago, hundreds of thousands of years ago. And the hijab is a covering for modesty. And so again, people think that the hijab is used to oppress women, but it's not. It's a covering for modesty, because Muslim women want to privatize their sexuality. And in doing so, they dress a certain way to, in fact, do that, to privatize their sexuality. And so I remember I was speaking on a panel, and so this woman said, well, you're liberated now. You're free. Why don't you, take all that stuff off? Why don't you just dress, another kind of way? And my response was, if you are free to wear as less as you want, why am I not free to wear as much as I want? Why is it not freedom for me to wear all that I want to wear, just as modest as I want to dress? People don't see this as freedom, but you're free to wear as less as you want. So if there's real freedom in America, if freedom is real, then if you're free to wear as less as you want, I need to be free to wear as much as I want, because I want the same freedom. I want the same exact freedom to wear what I want, how I want, because for me, hijab is a covering for modesty that is commanded for me in the Quran. So here's our quick recap. Muslims believe in one God, that Prophet Muhammad was the last messenger. The Quran is the final and preserved revelation from Allah. For Muslims, the purpose in life is to worship Allah, and Islam is our way of life. Thanks. Here's my information, Nisa Mohammed at howard.edu, phone number, and that is the address to our chapel.
Great. Thanks, Nisa, for walking
you.
us through that. We got a lot of questions here, and I'm going to put, again, the form there for questions. As you think about them, if there's more that come up, please feel free to put those in there, and we'll try to get to as many as we can.
Okay.
So one of the questions that you mentioned some of the prophets in Islam, and they're also revered as prophets in Christianity and Judaism. Does that mean, the question is, does that mean that the Hebrew scriptures, the Old Testament and the Gospels, are they also part of sacred texts for Muslims?
Absolutely. They're absolutely considered sacred texts for Muslims as well. Yes, they are. And in fact, one of the Quran talks about people of the book. And when the Quran talks about people of the book, they are referring to the books of the Gospels and the books of Torah and the Christians and the Jews. So yes, those are also revered scriptures for Muslims as well. Yes.
Great, thanks. One of the questions, wondering how exactly did Prophet Muhammad pray? And we heard you talk about how Muslims today are imitating that same form. What is it like? What does it involve? If you could kind of describe what that looks like. What are you doing? Why are you doing it?
What do the Muslims do? So there are it's a three-step process. If I'm gonna call it a three-step process in prayer, it starts off with a person standing up to prayer, the first rak'ah. So the prayers are divided into what's called a rak'ahs. And a rak'ah is a complete step of these three processes. And for the morning prayer, the Fajr prayer, Muslims do 2 rak'ahs. For the Zuhr prayer, they do 4 rak'ahs. The afternoon prayer, the Asr prayer, they do 4 rak'ahs. The Maghrib prayer, they do 3 rak'ahs. And then for the night prayer, the Isha prayer, they also do 4 rak'ahs. So the prayer starts off in a standing position, and generally Muslims cover their left hand with their right hand, and they recite the opening surah of the Holy Quran, which is called Fatiha. Muslims recite that, and then they also recite some verses from the Quran, and then they next bend from the waist down into the next position. They say some more verses generally in Arabic, and then they go down to the position of prostration, which is called sujood, which is what you saw the picture of. The men were all bowed, and that is the final position, and that's your really total submission. That is you just God, it's just me and you. I'm putting my mug on the rug, my head down. I am bowed here. I cannot get any lower than this. And I worship you, and I recognize you as the one God. And Muslims say some verses there in that position, and then they come back up, and then they start that process over again, and they do that. That's called a rak'ah. That.
Great. And then people will do that wherever they are at those times in the day. And are there times when people gather together to pray together during the week?
Yes, there are. So a lot of times prayers are done at the masjid every day, 5 times a day. So a lot of times people try to go to a masjid during the time of prayer to pray in congregation. You get more blessings if you're praying in congregation. So a lot of times men will go to the masjid in the morning for the Fajr prayer. They're trying to find some place near where they can go to pray in congregation wherever they are. So at Howard University, we have a prayer space. And so students come to the prayer space throughout the day to make their prayers, sometimes in congregation, sometimes by themselves, depending upon who's in the space.
Great. And then there's kind of a service, would you call it, on Fridays?
Yes, on Fridays, there's congregational prayer. It's called Juma. And at that prayer, there's an imam or a speaker, and he gives what's called like his khutbah, his sermon, and it's very short, maybe 15, 20 minutes, and then people pray 2 rak'ahs on Friday, because what happens is the sermon is considered part of the prayer service. And so on Friday, where typically Zuhr is 4 prayers, when you go to the Juma and you listen to the khutbah, that's considered part of the prayer service, and people then just make 2 rakahs.
Thanks. And somebody commented here, we appreciate you're translating the words, maybe the words in Arabic into what we would know in English.
Yes.
What you're
Yes.
saying.
As I said, I'm a convert, so I know. I've been there. I know. I had a learning curve. So yes.
Well, and would you want to speak a little bit about the language aspect? So a lot of words are shared in Arabic, and the Quran itself written in Arabic. And
Yes.
do you want to share a little bit about
So
that?
the Arabic language is the language of God, and it's a language that the Quran was revealed in. And so it's a language that unites Muslims all around the world. So even though if you go to China, even though the people in China speak Chinese, they are praying in Arabic. They're going to recite their prayers in Arabic because it's a language that has united Muslims all over the world. And all of us say our prayers in Arabic. It's a really beautiful language once you can understand it and learn it. And it's the language of God. It's the language that the Quran was revealed in. And so every Muslim strives to know some Arabic, at least that you can say your prayers in Arabic.
Great. Well, and I you were doing some good kind of explanation there, that the differences between cultures. I think you mentioned that,
Yes.
For example, food, or Mecca is in present day Saudi Arabia. Of course, Saudi Arabia has only existed, I think, as a kingdom, for less than 100 years. But so much of kind of how media and maybe popular thought is associating Islam, Saudi Arabia, Islam. And, could you share a little bit more about, I think you talked a little bit about kind of the difference between belief and culture. And, and so, for instance, the difference between hijab and burqa, and, are there different, you might see different color burqas in different places. Is there anything that men would wear, or is that more of a cultural thing versus a faith thing?
It's absolutely cultural. If you see men wearing the long garments sometimes, and that's culture. Everyone's culture does not wear that. They don't wear that in China like they do in perhaps India, and they don't have they don't wear the hijab on their hair, over their hair, but men have hijab too, which is hijab is another word for modesty. And so men dress in a way that is modest attire for men. And so generally you're not going to see Muslim men in biker shorts, for example, and, cut off t-shirts or whatever. So Muslim men want to be modest as well. And so their hijab is different from hijab that women wear. And so because a lot of times people know and understand Islam through the media, and generally the media is not kind to Muslims, that their understanding of what women wear and what men wear and all of that is very different. And so, like I said, men have hijab also. Hijab is a form of modesty.
Oh, that's really helpful for folks to hear. One of the questions comes about Ramadan and the fasting aspect, and there are certainly people for whom it's medically not a good thing to be fasting from either food or water. Maybe for folks who have eating disorders. Does Islam give some sort of provision for that? What would Islam say for folks in that situation?
That's a very good question. And that's why I started off talking about how loving and merciful Allah is. There are compensations for imperfections. We know everybody can't fast. In addition to medical reasons, there are women who are pregnant, women who are nursing, they have to eat to sustain themselves. And so there are other things people can do if they cannot fast. They can feed the needy, they can feed the poor, they can give charity. There are other things people can do to compensate for not being able to fast, and they can still experience the beauty of the month of Ramadan as well.
Do you have a favorite food as you celebrate iftar during Ramadan?
Do I have a favorite food? So it depends on where I'm going, so there are different masjids in the area, and They have South Asian night at one of the masters. I like chicken biryani, which is very good. I like lamb biryani. That's all very good. And I also like peach cobbler. So I need to go to a black master to get the peach cobbler, because if I go to the South Asian mosque, they're not going to have peach cobbler there. So it just really depends on what my appetite is like and what I'm interested in for the night. But it's just a really wonderful time that people, socialize and share the beauty of Islam and enjoy people's company and have fun together. And just not going to be able to do that this year, social distancing.
Yeah, yeah. Maybe a couple quick questions here. Somebody wondered if you could clarify, you mentioned the term people of the book.
Yes. So that's Christians and Jewish people. And so that's a terminology that's in the Quran, where it says people of the book. And that's to help us to understand that these people are to be revered, and their faiths are revered as well. I mean, God mentions them. I mean, it's like, you're talking about something, God mentions your name, and you're like, what? God mentioned my name? So it just shows us the reverence that God has for these people. And they're called people of the book, meaning they have a holy book as well. They have a book of sacred text and sacred scripture as well.
You were using the Arabic word for mosque, and I think, do you want to say that again for folks?
Masjid?
Yeah.
Yes.
Great.
Yes, masjid. Yes, masjid is another word, another term for mosque.
What happens at the mosque when there's not prayers going on? Are there studies? Are there gatherings? Are there organizing? I mean, what kind of things might happen
it's really all of the above. So it really depends on where the mosque is and really what's going on in that community, because some mosques are called Islamic centers or community centers. So they have different names, but there's a specific building where which is called the Masala, which is the prayer room where people go to pray. So every place has what's that called the Masala, where people go to pray. And you take your shoes off before you go there, and the men are on one side, the women are on another side, or sometimes the men are in the front, the women are in the back, sometimes the women are in the balcony, sometimes the men are downstairs. So it just really depends on the configuration of that particular community and that Islamic center. But they have classes, they have workshops, they have organizations, they do food, they have food banks. I remember when it was the government shutdown last year, went on for seemed like forever. The masjid that's near me, they did a food bank, and they gave away the food to people in the community who were not working. And I remember just telling people, go by this masjid, they're giving away food. And I thought, well, do I have to be a Muslim? No, you just have to need food. That's all it is. You just have to need food, and they will give you food. And so they do a variety of social service work. Like another masjid near me has a clinic that they serve for people who are low income. I guess it's social service work and just really serving the community. Just a variety of different things happen.
One of the questions here, and you mentioned the separation of genders during prayer. If you would share a little bit about why that is or where that comes from, and I appreciate how you mentioned that depending on the mosque, it's not always that this is where the men go, this is where the women go. And then another question is, what would happen for somebody who's transgender or gender nonconforming? Are there any special ways or opportunities for them to pray in the community?
Yes. So the first question, typically in most masjids you go to, the men are in the front, the women are in the back, and that is because, and this goes all the way back 1400 years ago. That goes all the way back, and that is because for the modesty of the woman, when you're bending down, you don't want some man's head at your backside. You really don't want a man, and then you're raising up and he's raising up behind you. I mean, that's really kind of uncomfortable for some women. And so as a protection and a modesty for women were placed behind the men, but also, as I said, for a protection, because a lot of times people were praying during times of war. And so the men being up front and sometimes being on the sides were a protection for the women as well. And so for students and people that may be transgender or trans non-conforming, what I've heard, because I have not had this experience, but what I have heard talking to other chaplains is that these people are in the middle, so that it's not They're not in the women's section, not so much in the men's section, but kind of like maybe in front of the women. So it just really depends on how comfortable this person is and where they want to pray. So the thing about Islam is that Allah's mercy overrides his wrath. And so we're taught that Allah is off returning to mercy. And so we try to make a way for everyone to find their own place in Islam.
Thanks for that. At many mosques, people have noticed the colorful, beautiful carpets, and also that there look to be patterns on there. Do you want to say anything about that? About if all mosques or praying spaces are directed in a certain direction?
Yes.
And are people close together? I mean, can people sit in the back pew if they want?
So yes, if you are there for the Jummah prayer service and you don't want to sit up front, you absolutely can stay in the back. I mean, you absolutely can do that. So the beauty of the carpet is in terms of the artistry of Islam and the beauty of Islam. There are fabulous, very expensive carpets that adorn masjids. And really in this area, if you go to Lanham, Maryland, where the DNet Center is, but not that far from University of Maryland. The DNet Center is, they have beautiful carpets. The whole artistry of how the architecture, how that is designed is just gorgeous. And so, but it's a reflection of your worship of God. That is a manifestation of your worship, the beauty of the prayer space and the beauty of the surroundings of where you go. And so that is, that's what, it's beautiful all over the world. I was in Turkey, and we went to a masjid where the architect was a woman. And it was just a very, very beautiful, gorgeous masjid. You'll find masjids all around. When you go inside, they are so beautiful and so gorgeous. One thing about the prayer rug and the prayer space is that if you go back to mythical writing, Aladdin is writing on a magic carpet, but he's really writing on a prayer rug. If you look at what Aladdin is writing on, and you look at a prayer rug that most people have, it looks just like Aladdin's carpet. So, there's some Islam hidden in their story somewhere. And what was the next question?
The direction of prayer.
The direction of prayer, yes. So Muslims pray toward the Kaaba in Mecca. That is where they direct their prayers. And so if you're with Muslims, they say it's time to pray, the first thing they're going to do is figure, okay, which is the way to pray? Where is the Qibla? Which way is the Kaaba? If no one knows, there are apps now on your phone that you can just open up the app and hold it, and it has a compass, and it'll show you, okay, this is where the Qibla is. No, not there, not there. No, this is where the Qibla is. Because Muslims want to be precise. They want to be precise, and they want to be excellent in their worship, and so they want to make sure that they are praying exactly in the correct way.
When you're in a question here, would you say that the terms mosque, masjid, and Islamic center are interchangeable?
People use them interchangeably, yes. Because, for example, like near me, there is the Muslim Community Center is near me. There's another place that's called a masjid that's near me. So people use those terms interchangeably.
Great, thanks. People might notice that in those spaces or other spaces there, that often the artwork, if there is artwork, is Arabic lettering. But what they don't see is pictures or depictions of people or angels or God. Do you want to talk a little bit about why that is?
So when Muslims pray, they don't want to pray where there are images of anything around them, because they don't want it to be any confusion about who we're praying to. They don't want there to be any misunderstanding. We are praying to the one God, and so we don't pray with images around us. And so that's why you typically don't see any images in a masjid, but you will see the beautiful calligraphy that is the Arabic language, which looks really, really beautiful. And people they go to school to learn how to do that kind of calligraphy. They saw artwork that is like that. People adorn their homes with Islamic calligraphy. It's really, really beautiful.
I visited the Supreme Court building here in Washington, D.C., and I was surprised to see there was a depiction of Muhammad. But you wouldn't see that, and Muslims wouldn't do that. Is that correct?
Absolutely correct.
And
yeah, you wouldn't see that at a masjid.
I've even heard that Muhammad's grave was unmarked intentionally so that people wouldn't go there to worship him, because again the worship is to God, to Allah.
Exactly.
We keep those questions coming. We got some great questions, and still have um, some more time to go over them here. Do you want to talk? People want to know a little bit about you and what what called to you when you started learning about Islam. How did you make that decision to convert? What was that like?
So my older sister converted first, and that was a really big deal for our family. My father was a Baptist minister, so I grew up in the church, Sunday school, vacation Bible school. I taught vacation Bible school, sang in the youth choir. So I grew up Christian, and it was a very big deal when my older sister, converted first. So it was all kind of fireworks, like, you throwing your life away. What about Jesus? What about God? You know, we thought you were saved. I mean, it was a really big deal, but she was very committed, and I was just kind of watching her, you know, in the corners, you know, as the sparks were flying all around. I was like just trying to stay out of sight of all the trouble, but I just kind of watched her life change. I just watched her, you know, become somebody very different, and I loved the person that she was becoming. And so then after a while, after I finished college, I converted, and then everybody was surprised when I converted. And it was just a really very, I mean, it was kind of hard at first, because for women, it's a whole different wardrobe. But I'm a shopper. I love to shop, love to dress. It was like, you know, now I need all new clothes, what do I do with my old clothes? And so it was a totally different experience. But my family, once they got over it with my sister and they saw that her life was not, you know, it wasn't a cult or anything, you know, because for Black people, you don't really know. You didn't know about a lot of Muslims, you know, at that time. But then I converted, and then my family was more accepting, and they were, you know, they understood, and was just been a welcomed experience. I mean, I've just loved being Muslim from the day I started, and it has just really, really been a transformation in my life that I'm just thankful God allowed me to be Muslim.
When did you put on the hijab? I mean, and could you talk a little bit about that? You talked a little bit about the hijab, but about it being a choice and um, putting it on, and are you supposed to take it off? When can you take it off? That kind of thing.
Those are great questions. So from the beginning, I started wearing hijab. I just figured if I'm going to do this, I'm just going to do it. And I've just been wearing hijab from the very beginning. So now for women, you can take your hijab off when you go home. The Quran says that women are allowed to uncover in front of their family and their close family members. And so you can uncover when you go home. You uncover while you're at home. And just you know, put it back on when you go outside into the public. But there are so many, I mean, women cover their hair now and they're not even Muslim. I mean, there's so many styles and ways in which women cover their hair to be modest that sometimes women do it just because they want to be modest. And so while we do it as a faith choice, as a devotion, you know, a lot of women cover their hair for stylish reasons, that they see it in a very beautiful way. They find ways to cover their hair, and they're all kind of YouTube hijab tutorials out there. It's a whole new fashion life out there.
Well, and I found, especially when I was in Jerusalem, that you have Orthodox Jewish women who are covering their hair. You have Greek Orthodox Christians women who are covering their hair. So there is I think that's a good
And
point
the
there
thing is,
too.
if you trace the history of women covering their hair, it didn't start with Muslim women. Christian women had covered their hair for decades, not decades, but hundreds of years. And so for Black women did not did not go to church without a hat on their head. They used to wear hats to church as a means of covering their hair. And so there's a whole history of Black women who covered their hair with hats. Black Catholic women wore like a little something over their hair. And I think maybe all Catholic women did this. But covering hair has been a faith tradition for a very long time.
Yeah, no, you mentioned that. I mean, in the epistles, the letters from generally written by Paul, he talks about women covering their heads in worship.
And so what happens, let me go back to this. Some Muslim women don't cover. All Muslim women don't cover. I guess it's a choice. Some Muslim women don't cover. But when they go to pray, they do cover. So
And
a Muslim woman may not cover typically throughout her day, but if she's going to pray, she'll cover then.
and if you could just share, I mean, it's not like the baby comes out of the womb and you immediately put a hijab on the baby. I mean, it is in Islam, it's a choice. When can a woman or a girl make that decision, or is that up to her family?
Generally around puberty. Generally around puberty, that sometimes moms want their girls to cover around puberty, but it is a choice. And sometimes moms will try to get their daughter used to cover. Maybe she'll cover when she goes to the masjid for Juma, so that it's not a big, no hijab yesterday, hijab today, so that she's getting used to and knows that this is a part of her life and who she is as she grows into it. I have students that have grown up in Muslim families and did not cover. And then, once they got to Howard University, met other girls who did cover and, have conversations about covering, and they want to cover, then they want to wear a hijab. And so I have other girls who come to Howard University in a hijab. Mom is gone, then the hijab is gone. So it just, really depends on the person.
Yeah. This hope maybe it will be a quicker one. Somebody asked, as you talk about Arabic being the language that God transmitted the Quran, so it's a holy language. For Muslims, is Hebrew also a language of God, or is Greek? The New Testament scriptures for Christians were originally written in Greek. Is there anything for those languages or any other languages?
No. So I think for Muslims, the Arabic is the language of God. Now we are very respectful and recognize the Hebrew language and recognize the Greek language, but for Muslims, the language of God is Arabic.
Well, I think that's I think that's a good, I think sometimes, especially when we're in interfaith spaces, we want to look for all the commonalities, and that's good. But we also recognize that there are differences, and that's okay, and that's part of what make the different religions different. And we even talked about there's a term that came from a bishop in my tradition, in the Lutheran tradition, where they talked about a holy envy. Are there aspects of other faiths that you just have a holy envy, not in the sense of like, we need to adopt that, or but more in a sense of, that's really, I appreciate that, and I can get behind something like that.
So I think for a lot of converts, there is some holy envy in terms of like who grew up with Christmas and decorating their homes and having it be a really festive time. And so this may not quite correlate, be an exact holy envy, but so now a lot of times Muslims who were converts and did experience, Christmas, they would go to great lengths to decorate their homes for Ramadan. They'll get all kind of decorations and they'll get all kind of gifts because this was something that they experienced as a Christian growing up, with Christmas. And so now, I mean, because they are very used to that, they enjoyed that, they bring that to Islam and decorate their homes really wonderfully with Ramadan decorations for the month.
Great. Well, and that jumps into the latest question I got here. And again, if you have any more questions, we probably have time for a couple more. But are there other holidays other than Ramadan, and could you share about some of those?
Yes, thank you for asking. So at the end of Ramadan, I should have mentioned this, at the end of Ramadan, there's a celebration called Eid. There are two big holidays in Islam, and they're both called Eid. So at the end of Ramadan, when people celebrate the end of Ramadan, which is the end of the month, and it's called Eid al-Fitr, and it's being returned to the normal. And so you return to your regular way of eating and you're drinking throughout the day. And it is a big celebration where people go to the mosque, they have food, they celebrate with family and friends. And so the Eids are major. They're a major, major, major holiday. And the other Eid is Eid al-Adha, and that's at the end of Hajj, the end of Hajj season. That is the other Eid to celebrate the conclusion of Hajj. And those are the two major Eids.
Great. And I missed this one from earlier. Sorry to whoever put this in. You talked a little bit about the afterlife and the weighing of the deeds. Could you share a little bit? If if there is more weight on the good side, what does that look like? Do Muslims have a very clear picture of what the afterlife is? Would you use the term heaven? Do you have a very clear picture of what if it didn't go so well for you? If is called hell? If you could share a little bit about that.
Yes. So Muslims want to get to what's called Jannah. And I guess Jannah, and you could understand Jannah like heaven. But Jannah is when your scale is weighed, the good and the bad, your good deeds outweigh your bad. Allah has promised you Jannah, which is a blissful afterlife. And then for those people whose scales are heavy on the opposite way, on the bad deed side, then they're promised the hellfire.
Great, thanks for sharing that. And maybe this is the last question here. And this is actually we have had interfaith cohorts of students at University of Maryland, and one of the most interesting questions that each faith gets asked, and people of that faith get asked, is if what it's like marrying outside of the religion. Are you allowed to marry outside of Islam? And if so, or if not, why or how, and what would you say to folks? And I understanding that there might be differences of opinions among Muslims or amongst other faiths, clearly.
So the Quran says that men are allowed to marry outside of the faith, other women, particularly women of the book. But women are not permitted to marry outside of the faith. And that is because if you want your husband to be a part of your life, you want your husband to be the head of your family, and you want to be able to follow his leadership, then you want to follow, for women, you typically want to follow a Muslim to be the head of your house, to be the head of your family, to be the father of your children, and to be the one that leads your family. For women, you want to follow a Muslim. And the other thing is that because for Muslim women, you're married to a man that you want to please and you want to, be happy together as a couple. And then what if all of a sudden he says, I don't like you in all those clothes. Take that stuff off. Wear something different. Wear this. You're like, well, wait a minute. You married me. I was a Muslim. I wore this. So that could be a source of, contention in a marriage. And so, but there are people who marry outside of the faith, and on both sides, men and women. And so, I have wonderful friends that are married. In fact, one of my daughter's friends, her mother is a Christian, but she particularly wanted to marry a Muslim man because she heard they treated their women so wonderful. And so she went on a Muslim dating site and, put all the information in and found a wonderful Muslim man, and he married her. And they had this great marriage, but she specifically wanted to marry a Muslim because in her mind, from what she heard, was that Muslim men treated their women so wonderful. And so, yeah, they
And
do.
it's my understanding Muhammad had a Jewish wife. Is that true?
Yes. And he married. So people think that he was just a womanizer or, lascivious. He just married all of these women. But what he did was he was uniting communities. These were women who were widowed, women whose husband had been lost in the war, or these were communities that he wanted to unite together. And so he married different women to be able to do that. And one of his wives was Jewish. Yes.
And when you say Muhammad's name, you say peace
Well,
be
I
upon him.
say Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, but that's the Arabic, but that just means peace and blessings be upon him. Because the
And
Quran says that we want to give, peace and blessings on the Prophet, because he was such a wonderful man, and what he did was just so amazing that he united communities. And he wasn't just a man of faith, he was a man of politics, he was a man of secularities, and he established Islam went nearly all around the world. And you see the 2 billion Muslims all praying 5 times a day, well, significant numbers of them praying 5 times a day, saying the same prayers in the same language. That is, you don't find that anywhere. It's just a very, very unique thing that he did. And so we're just very blessed. And so we just always try to, send peace and blessings upon him whenever we can.
great. Well, we'll end it there. Nisa, we are really grateful. Thank you so much for spending the time, for sharing with us about your faith and the faith of the other billion plus Muslims in the
Right.
world.
No,
Um,
thank you so much for having me. Really, the honor was mine. You have a wonderful group. I'm so privileged. Thank you.
yeah, well, and um, just a plug then, next week we'll have Rabbi Nancy Kramer. Uh, she was a professor at the Reconstructionist Rabbinical College in Philadelphia. She'll lead an introduction to Judaism next week. Same time. It's the same Zoom link, same password. We invite you
Great.
to share that widely. We'll, as I mentioned, this is being recorded. We'll share that link for folks. You can email us. I'm going to put here um, our our email here is lutheran@umd.edu. If you want to, we'll make sure then to send you the link for that and for future meetings. We want that to be shared. We want to give as many folks an opportunity here to learn about their neighbor's faith. And it'll be a multiple week series. We'll actually, in about, I think it's 3 weeks, we'll have kind of a, Nisa gave us a great introduction to Islam. We'll have actually another Muslim chaplain from Harvard who will go a little bit into some more specifics about some specific aspects of Islam. So um, a lot of stuff to learn from, and we're grateful for it. Thanks again, Nisa, and thanks everybody for being on the call. Hope to see you next week.
Thank you. Assalamu alaikum.
Like, well.